Well, hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of Today Through Jewish Eyes with Olivier. And I'm excited today because I have my good friend John Holler. Hi, John.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming on the show. You always teach me so much about what's going on in the world. You've got great connections. You've got a lot of your a wealth of information and knowledge. And so whenever you have I have a chance to talk to you, well, every time I talk to you to say hi and we start talking, I'm thinking, man, we should just do a recording
We should
right
we should
now.
just record all of our stuff,
We should
right?
just record. Well, actually, we could probably find the recording somewhere because they do record our conversations. But
Right.
that's for another day. So anyway, I'm excited to have you. I'm looking forward to be with you in at your church in the spring. And now tell me, give me again the name of your church and how we can find you because people know you, but they want to find your updates and your prophecy updates. So how do they find you? I'll put that in the description, but I want to hear from you.
Well, Fellowship Bible Chapel on YouTube, Rumble, Real FBC. We also have an app, Fellowship Bible Chapel.
Okay. And you do an update every week? You still do that?
I do. I do.
Yes. And are they always as short as they've always been, an hour and a half?
Yeah. I mean, the only we're short last week was I started a half hour late. So I have to make sure everybody gets out of there. There's always concern that if we get out too late, the buffet will be closed by the time we get
Oh
there.
yeah, that's a big
And
concern.
if I get done too early, though, we run into the Baptist. You know, so
All right. So you and I talked a few days ago, and we were calling each other for something, and then of course the conversation because our we get so many emails every day, and so much we're bombarded by information, and then you started talking to me, and I told you I said I've got great concern for my Jewish people, and I do, I really do. I'm concerned because I talk to a lot of Jewish people in my family and my friends, and they there was a sense of fear and no hope, and of course, as people have followed my channel and follow me, they know what's going on with anti-Semitism, and it's just picking up momentum every day. And before we get to talk about a few things that took place in the U.S., I want to touch on a topic that you and I both agreed a couple of days ago that were very, very concerning, is that it seems like Israel and the IDF are making great progress in the Gaza Strip in eradicating Hamas. At a cost, though. I mean, it's not, it's complicated, but it's manageable, it appears. But there's a greater problem that not a lot of people are talking about, and it was a concern of mine, and I voiced it to you, and you said, Olivier, could not agree more. And then you started sharing with me, and that's where I want you to start with a great concern that something is going to basically
well,
to explode in the north at the
yeah.
Lebanon-Israel
Let
border.
me describe. Israel is fighting a multi-front war.
Agreed.
So I think if people really want to follow this, I'm going to make a few recommendations here because I think that um, you you'll get even a little bit better information than I do. But these are people that I follow. One is Caroline Glick, and you can find her at JNS uh, Jewish News Syndicate JNS YouTube channel.
She does
She's doing
a 30-minute review. They're really good. They're
right.
packed with
She's
information.
doing a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour almost every day now.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of interviews and that type of thing. I'm trying to do more interviews. There's also Gadi Taub and Michael Duran have a Rumble channel called Israel at War. It's like an update. They post a couple hours a week. There's also, um, let's see, it's called EMET, Middle East Endowment for Middle East Truth, and
Yes, I get those too. I
they
get
do podcasts, webinars on a fairly regular basis. And then, if you want a 30-minute briefing about 4 days a week, the Israeli Defense and Security Forum, that's idsf.co.il, that's retired Brigadier General Reserve General Amir Avivi's group.
Amir Avivi, yeah.
And he's a friend of mine, and I've done some stuff with them and trying to up their social media profile among Christians here. And they're doing 30 minutes a day at 10 a.m. Eastern every day. And there is an archive. If you sign up for one, you'll get emails. They don't spam you. They will ask for contributions on occasion, but
then if you miss those, they usually have, you can go back.
There is a page. It's on my Facebook page. I linked to it the other day where the archived Zoom videos appear, usually within 24 hours after they're given. So
I will try. You know what? I will try to put those links in the description of the video. That'll be helpful for viewers.
Okay. So Israel and so like I said, I've been working with IDSF for a couple of years now almost. And Israel's facing, I want to say 4 fronts, 5 fronts that they have to worry about. Of course, we have Gaza, and they're doing pretty well in Gaza. But let me just make a comment about that. This is incredibly difficult fighting. Understand, too, that Israel, they don't maintain a huge standing army. So a lot of these guys are called up reserves. So 2 months ago, these guys were working regular secular jobs or religious jobs. And they've come in and they've had to be trained. Now, exactly a year ago last week, I was invited to the Christian Media Summit. And one of the things that they did was one day we went down to a base in the south and we had a briefing for a couple hours from a general. Then we went over to the Urban Warfare Training Center, and then they showed us a tank in operation and that type of thing. But the Urban Warfare Training City is a mock-up of Gaza. It's multi-story buildings, tightly packed, tunnels, all sorts of things. And now I'm seeing videos appearing, and I'm going to try to play some in my update on Sunday. I had some technical issues this past Sunday. Seemed like everything was an issue this past Sunday. But are essentially Israeli soldiers with like GoPro cameras on their helmets, taking videos of them and fighting in Gaza. And you can see that this is incredibly difficult urban fighting, as difficult a fighting situation as you will see. Then you add on top of that, or underneath it, the tunnels.
The tunnels.
So yesterday, the Golani Brigade is a well-trained, excellent brigade of Israel, but there were a couple commanders, sergeants, and 8 total, I think, killed in a booby trap as they went into some tunnels, or they went into a building that they thought they had cleared. And understand that when they clear these, they clear these buildings, then there's a ceasefire. And during the ceasefire, Hamas goes in and booby traps the buildings. So what Israel has thought was a cleared building now is a booby trap building. And so yesterday there was a tragedy. So they're probably up to, I'm going to guess, IDSF has a running tally based on government reports of, they're probably up around 110 soldiers killed in Gaza, plus about 300 killed or more, 340 killed on October 7th on their bases in southern Israel. And the number keeps changing because they keep finding hostages.
And for clarification, the 300 you're mentioning is not a brought down from 1,200. This is 300 within the 1,200. 300 soldiers within the 1,200 people, the rest being civilian. Just want to make it clear.
Yeah, and it was cool. I mean, somebody sent me a video of an attack on a base, and they were around the barracks or in a gathering place, male and female soldiers, and the one female soldier was essentially saying, how do they know where we are? How do they know where we are? Well, what we found is that they were buying cell phone data or hacking in and getting cell phone data. Remember, Israel had that big scandal about the Pegasus software, where that software was put on phones of like political opponents and everything so people could be tracked. The head of Dubai, the Sheikh of Dubai, he used it to track his daughter to a yacht in the Indian Ocean within the coastal territory of India, territorial waters of India, and sent a commando team over there to bring her back to Dubai. So he's not a real nice guy.
No.
And but he had a very messy divorce from his sixth wife, which is, everybody knows it's the sixth wife that always gets you. It really takes you to the cleaners. She actually happens to be the half sister of King Abdullah II of Jordan, and she took him for about $800 million. So she lives in London with her kids. But so that Pegasus software, though, when this first happened, I was like, how did they know so much about where everybody was? And my thesis, it's not been confirmed yet, so we can still talk about it, confirmed or blown out of the water, is that they were using something like that to track soldiers' phones. But they were also monitoring things and buying data. They knew like where people were going in and out of buildings. And they knew the way they went in from the data. They didn't have specific, like, this is Joe's cell phone, and we know Joe did this, but they had the data of the movements, and they could tell where the locked and unlocked doors were, and they had detailed maps with all of this information.
And they prepared for at least 2 years.
They did, and they had tremendous stores built up, and they were hoping to get all the way to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv in this. So, and it took, I think there was a couple guys rounded up. It took a month to round up the last of the guys that came across the border that day. And there was probably 4,500 people, a couple thousand Hamas and a bunch of innocent civilians, as they like to be referred to in the media. So Michael Duran and Gadi Taub talked a lot about that on their show, one of the shows that they did about the data. So this is a front. So they're in close quarter, hand-to-hand combat in a lot of cases, and booby traps, and every corner is a death trap. Every door is a death trap, a potential death trap. And so, the fact that they've only lost 110 soldiers thus far, frankly, I would have expected it to be 5,000 to 10,000 at this point. So they're doing very well, but this is a front. And then the question always becomes, now they're moving into the South, and now there's no place for people, the refugees, to go. So that's going to cause a political problem in the world. If you think you've seen anti-Semitism so far, you haven't seen anything yet as they expand this operation. Then the question ultimately becomes, when it's over, and they'll win, there's no way that Hamas is going to stand up against it, assuming that they
read an article that said it said that Netanyahu, I think it was Netanyahu, said that there's no way that when this is over, the Palestinian Authority in any way, shape, or form is going to control Gaza.
That's the question: is when the day after Hamas, what happens? So our government, the U.S. government, is pushing to have them reconstitute. I think Kamala Harris said this at COP28. One of the things she talked about was to reconstitute or remake the Palestinian Authority. That's not going to work. These are terrorists also. And the concern that I have too is that, and this leads to the next potential front, is the West. Well, not necessarily. I'm moving north, but first let's talk about
I'm tracking.
The quote West Bank. We always put that in scare quotes because it's really biblical Judea and Samaria.
Right.
And that's a big problem. That's a big problem, because the support for what happened on October 7th among West Bank Judeo-Samarian Arabs is just under 80%. That's not good. So that's a potential front. In fact, there's pretty good evidence that what happened was that some of the troops that were guarding the border in the South were shifted up to areas in the West Bank the day before the October 7th because of unrest in the West Bank. So this is a multi-front war, and Iran's been seeding weapons and all sorts of things and militia groups and that type of thing in the West Bank. So that's front number two.
Do you think that it's possible that, and it's just speculation, but you make me think of that they were working with some people in Judea and Samaria, and to create a diversion to bring some troops from the south so that they could be more successful with a surprise terrorist attack in the south?
That could very well be. That could very well be.
Yeah, we don't know, but that's a possibility.
Yeah, so that's it's clear that that's happening. I mean, because they've had tremendous problems in Jenin, in Nablus, and Hebron, and the usual terrorism hotspots. And there's a pretty strong, very strong Hamas presence within the West Bank.
Yeah.
By the way, if you go to Caroline Glick's YouTube channel and you want to sort of understand the mindset of the Muslim world, she did an interview about a week ago with Dr. Mordecai Kadar. And Dr. Kadar is probably the leading Arab and Muslim Islam expert in the world, certainly in Israel and also in the world. I mean, he's certainly within, I would say, the world top 3. He speaks fluent Arabic. I think he's memorized the Quran. And he's proposed this, for example, he says that the Palestinian society is very tribal. So what they need to do is something almost like, if they're going to get them on the same page, they need to do something like the Federation of Sheikdoms that make up the United Arab Emirates. They need to do like an Emirati. So get the 7 or so tribes that exist within the West Bank, because the people in Hebron, they don't like Abbas.
United Palestinian Authority with Fatah, Hamas, and
well, you can't have those organizations involved, but you need to recognize the tribal nature of Arab society and exploit that. So, see, the Saudis, they're just one tribe in the Arabian Peninsula, but they're now the dominant tribe, of course, and the richest family on the planet. But this is also true in the West Bank. So Abbas, I think, is up from around Nazareth. So the people in Hebron and other these different tribal regions in the Palestinian areas, they can't stand the guy. And he's a terrorist. And it's not going to change. And what is he? He's in the 14th year of a 4-year term,
17th,
or something like that.
17th.
Oh, I guess that's right, 17th. So I stopped counting a few years ago because it was such a ridiculous thing.
I know. And you know what he wrote his PhD dissertation on?
Was to deny the Holocaust.
Holocaust denial, yeah. The very Holocaust he denies, that on the other side of the coin is that they're threatening that they're going to have another one on the Jews, but another one based on one that did not happen, which makes no sense.
Right. So that's the that's an issue. Hang on here. I want to do something here. So I was going to try to port this over to our YouTube channel, but it didn't work. So I was just trying to. I'll do it when you send me the video after we're done. I'll put it up on our YouTube channel. But so that's front number 2: Judea, Samaria, or the West Bank. Another front that we're working north, but is also in the Arab areas is within Israel proper, that are not in what they call areas A, B, and C. Go Google areas A, B, and C. And Area A is under total control. I think I have it right. Area A is under total control of the Palestinian Authority. And that's when you're going into those areas, if you've ever been on a trip to Israel and you go into certain areas like down around Jericho and the road down to Jericho, it says you're entering Area A, and entry here is forbidden to Israeli citizens, Jew or Arab. So they can't go into like Nablus. They can't go to parts of Hebron. They can't, they couldn't go to Gaza. So that's a potential hot flashpoint too, because there's a lot of Arabs within Israel itself that are upset. So that I would call that front 3. So Gaza, West Bank, within Israel, Arab populations, and now we get to the north. And the north is very hot. So I heard a briefing, I think the IDSF on Monday had on Sarat Zahavi. She lives in the north, up in the area in the upper northern Galilee region, up along the Lebanon border. I don't think she lives in Metula. I think she lives a little bit further south. But she made some incredibly important points about what's going on up there. Is that and on her blog, by the way, she blogs and puts up articles at a place called Alma Research. It's israel-alma.org. Excellent site for finding out what's going on. She focuses mainly on the north because that's where she lives. She made a couple points. She goes, we have to do something. We can't just, there's no accepting the status quo in the north. We will have to go in to do an operation. And Gaza is basically, it's flat with very condensed urban conditions.
But Lebanon has hills.
Lebanon is rocky, mountainous. And she said every third home in southern Lebanon, south of the place called the Litani River. So that would include the biblical areas along the coast of Tyre and Sidon, and the area from which Solomon got the cedars of Lebanon for the temple. Every third home is connected to Hezbollah in some way, whether it's a weapons store, a headquarters, or a place from which they will launch rockets.
So it's much more than the Gaza Strip.
Well, it's like the Gaza Strip on steroids, but on much more difficult terrain. Very rocky, very hilly. I mean, so whereas you have buildings where people can hide behind buildings and doors, in Gaza, you have rocks and trees in the north. But the problem is right now is that there are about 200,000 Israelis in Israel that are now displaced from their homes internally. That's out of a population of 9 million. So I don't know what the ratio would be if it was the United States, but it would be in the millions and millions of people that would be displaced proportionally. So they're in hotels in the Red Sea. And I did an interview with Jonathan Feldstein from Genesis123.co last week. He's a journalist, podcaster in Israel. You can find that on our YouTube channel. It's a very moving interview. It just so happened to be like a year to the day from the day we met in Jerusalem last year. And it was a year to the day from the time we were down at Gaza. I mentioned we went to Gaza, we went to the Urban Warfare Training Center, and then we went over to the kibbutz. It's probably the closest kibbutz to the border fence with Gaza. So there's a fence around the kibbutz, and then it's called Niram, Nirim. And then,
by the way, as you talk, I'm doing the math, and it's between 6 and 7 million in the US if you compare.
Okay. I mean, so that's like 2 Los Angeleses.
Or one New York.
Displaced.
Or one New York.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's how we wouldn't tolerate that. And so Sarat, she made an incredibly important point. She said, we're a small country. We are growing in population, housing a problem, and we need to be able to live in Israel from border to border in safety and security.
Amen.
And so they can't do that now. And so 60,000 people in the north have left and gone to the south, moved south.
Right.
I don't think Nahariya has been evacuated much yet. Maybe the northern part of Nahariya, which is the farthest north town on the city on the coast, just south of the Lebanon border. But Kiryat Shimona is like 25,000 people, and there might be 2,000 people left there. So you can imagine the disruption. I mean, so these people leave, they have businesses, they have lives, they have jobs. And so the economic costs are just incredible. And I know that somebody said that there was a displaced person down in a hotel at the Red Sea, or a lot, that committed suicide the other day because of the pressure. And also, mind you, that a lot of these people from the south, they still have relatives, friends, and all across Israel, people know soldiers or friends.
Yeah,
the soldiers are family members of friends. It's a very, very difficult situation. Everybody is touched by this every day. So when I interviewed Jonathan Feldstein last week, it was very interesting because I'd been in Israel, and I said, well, I went to Shabbat at a Orthodox Jewish family's home before we left, before I left to come back to the U.S. And the Torah portion that week was, which is the same Torah portion that it was last week when I was talking to Jonathan, because it recycles every year. The Torah portion for Shabbat was Joseph being sold into slavery by his brothers. And Jonathan said, well, I have a son, and he will be 25 tomorrow. And yesterday, his brigade in the IDF went into Gaza.
Wow.
And he said, and he wrote a very nice article at Times of Israel. You can find it. Like, I'll never look at this. Now I know how Jacob felt, because it's pretty certain that when Joseph was taken to Egypt by his captors, that he passed through Gaza. And he says, now I have a son in Gaza. And it just so happens that that's the Torah portion that was read at my son's bar mitzvah.
Wow.
And he said, every morning we get up and we look at the dead soldiers as they release the names after they've identified the families. And every day it's like somebody you know, or the son of a friend. So it's a very small country. Everybody,
It is,
you know,
yeah.
when you've spent time over there, you run around and you run into people that you know
All the time. All the time.
Yeah, it's like New York. You run into people that you know, and it's about as many people as New York, spread over something the size of New Jersey. So it's very difficult. So the North, so as Sarat Zahavi said from Alma, we cannot tolerate this. Something has to be done. Now, there's a lot of pressure internally. So I did watch. I sort of follow Cal Thomas's methodology. He used to say, I get up every morning and I read the Bible, then I read the New York Times, because I want to know which side. I want to know what the people on the side of good and evil are thinking. So good is the Bible, evil is the New York Times, and I sort of do the same thing. So I did watch a podcast the other day. Oh man, I can't. They had Aaron David Miller, who's he's a analyst that's on CNN quite a lot, kind of a lefty, but there was a former head of Mossad and I think a former head of the IDF, and they were talking about, well, this will all go away if we get rid of Netanyahu. So the political situation is starting to bubble up again. There's tremendous division in Israeli society. But it was very interesting, Olivier, in terms of like a Bible prophecy thing. These guys they were talking like the only thing that will work is a two-state solution. That's the only thing that it was the terminology that they used. I'll play some of the clips on Sunday. The only thing that will unite the world is a two-state solution. And if we can get the world, it was very odd the way they said this. I'll have to go back because maybe I was reading too much into it, but I don't think so, because they were saying like, if we get this solved, we can have world peace. So
they're setting the stage for the coming of the Antichrist.
Yeah, that's what Nuts Like You would say. Yeah.
Okay, so
Nuts Like Us would say. I agree. I agree 100%. And then I also hear some of my Jewish friends, Orthodox, when they're talking about we're on the verge of a messianic age. They're saying this. This is speeding up the arrival of the Messiah.
Right.
And we know that this is a problem for us as Christians, as in terms of how we view this through the lens of the Bible and Bible prophecy.
Right.
So a lot of this, but it was very interesting listening to the secular, anti-Netanyahu, left-leaning guys saying this will solve all the problems of war in the world.
Right now, I think that right now they cannot possibly even fathom. They shouldn't even think of getting rid of Netanyahu. Netanyahu, like him or not, right now he's the man for the job. And when it all settles down to when Gaza comes back to whatever normalcy is, but then they have to deal with the other fronts. I agree, but they cannot let politics get in the way of the safety of the country right now.
Right. So, I mean, so you have from people in the Middle East and the secular media and everything, there's this push for the two-state solution. Now, and remember, it was September 22nd, so less than 3 months ago. Benjamin Netanyahu. Well, first there was an interview on Fox News of Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince, on Fox News with Bret Baier on Tuesday or Wednesday. And then Friday, Netanyahu gave his speech at the UN General Assembly. And it was very interesting what he said. He used the passage in Deuteronomy that talked about the blessing and the curse. And that's having been to Shechem.
This is Deuteronomy 28?
Right. But if you keep the law, you will get these blessings. If you disobey, you will have these curses.
Right.
And then when Joshua brought them back into the land at the time of the conquest, they actually went to Shechem. And remember, I forget the passage in Joshua, he divided the people, 6 tribes on Mount Gerizim and 6 tribes on Mount Ebal, where the altar of Joshua has been found, by the way. There's no question about that. And the people on Mount Ebal shouted the curses, if they disobeyed. The people on the other mountain shouted the blessings. And it wasn't like there were 50 people. This is like over 1 million people on each mountain. I mean, this is a lot of probably people. Scared, the panties off of the people in Shechem at the time. And they did find that tablet that Scott Stripling and some of the guys are excavating some of the sifting project at Mount Ebal. They found a tablet that was actually a tablet of curses, which they found on Mount Ebal, which was the mountain where they shouted the curses. So it's all this archaeology. There's so many things operating, so many different levels here. So that's, but everybody's pushing for this two-state solution. And the Mohammed bin Salman, about a year ago, June, there was an article in an Arab newspaper that's controlled by the Saudi royal family, and also in the Wall Street Journal, about a proposal for what they call the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, or the Jordan option, or the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine, where they would sort of take what Trump had proposed to do with Gaza, the West Bank, and they would connect that to Jordan. But Israel would maintain security control over the Jordan Valley and the West Bank areas. Now, I don't know that works, but Mohammed bin Salman seems to like it. And it also included some provisions for control on the Temple Mount. But but that also raises the potential of a fifth front, which would be a conflict with Egypt and Jordan, because they don't want the Palestinians. They won't take them back. In fact, the more secure, the securest part of the Gaza border, there's a border with Israel and a border with Egypt. Egypt has a much bigger and more sophisticated wall than Israel does.
So you're saying that this could possibly bring Egypt and Jordan into a conflict with Israel?
That's possible. That's possible.
I want you to pause for a second, because for whatever it's worth, I'm in the camp of those who believe that Psalm 83 is not a real war. It's a literary device that Asaph used to describe that the whole world was against the Jews, like all the countries he knew around Israel at the time. And so I don't think it's a real war. And then one of my arguments when I present that view is that I bring several arguments, and I say, and on top of that, Egypt and Jordan, 2 of the countries that Asaph lists in Psalm 83, are currently at peace with Israel. So, and I say, unless both of them go to war against Israel, which I don't think it's possible at all. Not that it would completely help me change my view, but it would be interesting if those 2 would break their peace treaties and go against Israel, because now we've got all the countries listed against Israel in Psalm 83 that would go against Israel. Again, that's not making me change my view necessarily, but it would be an interesting development.
It would, and I'm not sure it's a war either. I think
you and I agree on something. That's good.
See, what time is it? It's
we, we,
3:47 Eastern time on December 14th. No,
we agree on a lot.
no, I think at a minimum it shows a permanent condition of the people surrounding Israel,
Yes,
of the
absolutely.
hatred and the conniving and the conspiring.
And
So
them going against Israel doesn't have to fulfill a Psalm 83 pattern to happen. It could happen.
the pattern might be the way that it may be playing out is a treachery through the Abraham Accords. So when I was in Israel, everybody was like, Abraham Accords, fantastic, it's great, it's great. So this was a year ago. So this was December of 2022. And I said to some friends, and they're Orthodox and they're Zionist, and they moved to Israel because and they want to live they live in an area that you might call the settled. They live in Efrat, like Bethlehem Ephrata. I think we read about that and some of the prophecies in the Old Testament. But I said, be careful of those Abraham Accords because it might be and they're like, why? They're bringing all this economic benefit. John, the business guy who spoke at the media summit, he said, well, it's not going to be $50 billion of trade or 100 billion. It's going to be 10 trillion of trade. And that's kind of interesting because when we look at there's an economic thing behind this Antichrist. The Antichrist is going to control the economy, and there's sort of this economic aspect to it. And it's also interesting when you look at the north. If you remember, I said that southern Israel or southern Lebanon, south of the Litani River, north of the border, south of the Litani River, is the area of Tyre and Sidon.
Right.
That's also mentioned in Psalm 83. So what happens if Israel does go in there and they clear that area out? Then that area of what's left is supportive of Israel through like an Abraham Accord.
Right.
That could very well happen. So I think, remember, we think peace first, then the problem. So I just think that the way the nations are lining up, and then you also have Syria and Damascus and all that stuff, and I know that's a controversial thing about whether Isaiah 17 is a future prophecy or it's already been fulfilled. Sometimes it's hard because Jewish prophecy is patterned, and it's kind of hard to well, yeah, I think it was kind of fulfilled, but maybe it's going to be really fulfilled the next time. So that's always an open question,
right,
on those things. So I think Psalm 83 is very, very important in this whole analysis of what's going on, particularly in light of the Abraham Accords and how that might play out. I'm not, like I said, I'm not dogmatic about any of it. I probably less dogmatic than I've ever been, except when it comes to your views. Then I'm pretty dogmatic. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. I think we agree probably on way more than we.
Yeah, no, we
think,
do agree on. Yeah, we do agree on.
So I just think that there's a lot of moving pieces here from the Bible prophecy standpoint that's got this war layered on top of it. And look, Olivier, let's be honest, okay? I did some interviews with people. I don't even know the last time we talked, but we did it. We talked, and we never talked about any of this. Was it after October 7th that we talked the last time, or was it before?
You and I talked. We did a video.
Yeah.
Oh, that was after. That was after the war.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well then, but nobody doing interviews like our friend Tom Hughes or anything. The week leading up to October 7th, nobody said that there was going to be a war in Gaza.
No.
You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Nobody said, hey, we're going to have a war in Gaza this week and it's going to be really, really bad. So we just have to be humble enough to admit that we don't call these things all the time, even though we study Bible prophecy. It's very complicated. And that's so a lot of different fronts going on. So the war's going pretty good, but they're losing the narrative. in the world right now. I see people say, well, boy, if Israel doesn't get this done pretty quickly, they're going to have a lot of people against them. And I think that ship sailed already.
That ship sailed, absolutely.
That's somebody who's really optimistic.
I
And
mean,
I think
technically within a week or less after the Gaza terrorist attack, the narrative was already shifting from the victims and the bloody murder of the 1,200. At that time, it was 1,400, but they brought it down to 1,200. It shifted from that to the unprecedented humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip, and that's all they care about. And that has catapulted all the anti-Semites of the world on the forefront, going, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to go after the Jews wherever I can find them, and that's where we are today.
right. So I think I have said, I think we said this the last time we talked, this issue of Israel, physical political Israel today, is going to be one of the most divisive things in the church. That it's going to make like arguments over where's the final Babylon or timing of the rapture or anything. It's going, all that stuff's going to pale by comparison.
No, we agree. We talked about that, and I did an article in the video, and I called it. I'm looking on my screen. Is Israel the final dividing factor for Christians in the end times? And I think it is. And by the way, John, it's not you. It's not you and I. It's Tom Hughes. It's Brendan Oldhouse. It's Andy Woods. It's all of us pretty much agree that that this is going to be the final dividing factor.
Yeah, and it's bad. And the propaganda, and I don't know why, but all these anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, Jew-hating nuts, my Twitter feed is just packed full of these things. I mean, it's wading through this like you would not believe. And, now Russia's kind of weighing in too, which I think is significant. Putin was in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates last week, and he went back to Moscow and had a meeting with Raisi of Iran. He also had a meeting with the Crown Prince of Oman. So he's pretty much said, Israel, you got to stop. You got to stop. And our government is saying you got to stop. You can't go on. You've got to be over and done with.
But they can't afford to do that.
No, the concern though is that a lot. So now it's time to come back and circle back and understand why some of us actually do refer to this as the Biden administration, because in 2015 or 16, I think it was 16, Israel's agreement was up for renewal from U.S. aid. So they entered into what's known as a memorandum of understanding. And everybody always says, well, Israel's going to get $35 billion in aid over 10 years. No other country on the earth gets that. And that's probably true, but it's not like they're taking $35 billion of cash over and dropping it off at the Knesset or the seat of government in Jerusalem. That's not how it works. They have to buy stuff from us. And then there's joint development. So we figure, well, we'll get benefit from their knowledge and we'll get better defensive weapons out of it. And then they'll buy stuff from us. So a lot of their, they have those fleet of F-35s. That's really dependent on U.S. support.
It's like a business agreement.
Right. It's not, it's blown way out of proportion as to what it is. It benefits us as much. And in fact, as Caroline Glick, I think, points out, it really kind of hamstrings Israel a lot in what they want to do. And now they're dependent on us for a lot of their weapons and ammunition, that sort of thing. And so if the Biden administration says, well, we're not going to supply you anything after December 31st, Israel's at a very, very difficult spot, especially when you think they got the whole thing with Hezbollah to do. There's no way that they cannot do that.
It has even started with Hezbollah.
Right. And then the potential is that expands into a much wider war. So it's It's a very difficult, very delicate situation. So even if they win Gaza, that's only one little part of the story. And they'll win. I don't have any doubt about that. The question is at what cost? And
Exactly.
what I don't like,
Yeah, you win,
Olivia,
but there's going to be casualties.
oh yeah, I mean, look, I thought there could be, like I said, 10 or 15,000 in the whole operation. So now they're at about 115 or so. I'm just taking it. There was like 90 some yesterday, and I know they had the 8 from the Golani Brigade. So I'm going to say it's about 110, 115.
So how soon do you think Israel could potentially? Well, first of all, let me ask you this: do you think Israel is going to strike Lebanon before Lebanon strikes Israel?
I don't know. There's a cat and mouse game that goes on up there every day. I mean, they've killed 100 Hezbollah soldiers roughly over this time, which is it's a very high percentage of what they killed in the Second Lebanon War in 2006. So I don't really know. They sort of struck first in 67 because they knew they had no choice. And they had a lightning victory. They didn't in 73, and they lost, what did they lose? About 3,000 soldiers in 1973, when the country was like 2 million people. That was a huge number. I don't know, Olivier. I just think so. A number of years ago, there was a big security conference called the Herzliya Security Conference, and the head of the Israeli Air Force at the time, I cannot remember his name, he gave a speech. You can find it online. I think it was 2016 or 17. And he said, listen, when we went into the Second Lebanon War, we were in there for 37 days. And I can tell you we're ready. This is 6 years ago. Mm. We're ready, and we will do more in 24 to 72 hours than we did in 37 days. And it will be shock and awe like the world has never seen. And when you hear some of the Israeli defense people talk about it, they're talking about making southern Lebanon look like Gaza all the way to Beirut. That's even going north of the Litani River. So what is it like? Well, I know Damascus to Beirut is about 50 miles. So I think it's 40 miles or 45 miles from the parts of the Israeli border to Beirut. And I don't know that they have any choice, because they can't tolerate this existing like this.
You're right.
We wouldn't tolerate it.
No.
I mean, we wouldn't tolerate a force like that living on the outer belt of Washington, D.C.
And there's such a level of double standard when it comes to Israel that anybody in the world would not tolerate a tenth of what's going on in their own country, but they're all pushing for Israel to cease fire, to split the country into two-state solution. There's not going to be any two-state solution. There's only one-state solution viable. That's Israel, with Arabs living in Israel if they want to, like they have. There's about 2 million of them right now. They're the vast majority of them very happy. But
right.
The other one-state solution is the Palestinian state, and as they say it very clearly, from the river to the sea, the entire place being in Arab country, with no Jews. So,
but even within Israel, the support for Hamas among Arabs is pretty high, and that's pretty troubling. So, but you see this. So we want to talk about anti-Semitism just a little bit. It's shocking to me what I'm seeing. Just the outright lies. Now they're saying, well, Israel killed, but most of the Israeli people on October 7th were killed by Israelis forces. Remember the young lady from the dance party down there, and she was put in the back of a pickup truck with a broken leg, and I mean, they found pieces of her skull in Gaza and could say that she was dead. I saw a picture of her. Somebody froze a picture from one of the videos of her hiding behind a tank. Okay, and between her and the tank were a couple Israeli soldiers. And immediately, so this is a propaganda channel on Twitter. She would say, "Oh, look at how Israel uses young ladies as human shields." It's some of the most vile stuff that I've ever seen. And then, of course, we have the situation last Tuesday with the presidents from Penn, MIT, and Harvard making these ridiculous statements. Now, the Penn president has been fired. The chairman of the board of the Penn Board of Trustees has resigned as well. But Harvard's come out in support of their president.
And I told you earlier, John. I think, and we kind of need to wrap this up, so maybe we'll talk
Right.
about this and wrap it up. But uh, I see this being wrong on three levels. First of all, so she, the president of Harvard, what's her name?
Gay.
Christine or Claudine. Claudine, yeah, it's a French name.
Claudina Gay.
Yeah, Claudine Gay. So she comes out, and then she does not denounce Hamas. And then when confronted, she says that it's contextual. The genocide of Jewish people. Is it ever? Would you support the genocide of Jewish people? And it said it depends on the context. The question I have is, in which context do we ever justify genocide of any people?
Right.
I mean, there's no context for that unless you're a monster or evil or you're a
Right.
Hitler. So number one, she's wrong, but also the fact that the board supported her. It just I don't comprehend this. There's a lot of people now. There are a lot of people on Harvard campus that they don't know what to think. They don't feel safe. Because if their president, who does not denounce Hamas, says that genocide of Jews is just a matter of context to justify it, and then she continues to have a job, I hope I'm right. I could be wrong, but I think she's going to eventually have to resign. There's going to be more pressure on her.
I don't know. I think she has way more intersectionality points than we can even imagine.
Yeah,
given her race, her sex, I don't know, her
that is true.
orientation.
That is true. She for right now she was given a get out of jail free card. That was pretty obvious in the last couple of days. It's very it's in my definition of anti-Semitism, I always start with those two words. Anti-Semitism is the irrational and satanic hatred of the Jews. And if you don't understand that it's number one, satanic, and because it's satanic, it's irrational, but it looks rational, then you don't understand it. But it is really, there's no other way to understand anti-Semitism than to understand that it's a spiritual warfare against the Jews.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's just it's one of these things we talk about, like we never thought we would see it, and
No.
now we have. And so the question somebody always has is, well, so what's going to happen before we're out of here? And the answer is, well, at least everything that we've seen so far, and probably a little bit more.
Well, you and I'm
really confident in saying that.
John, you and I both agree that we have not seen the worst yet.
Yeah, I'm afraid that it's going to be pretty crazy what's going to happen.
And I always, when we have a conversation like this on the situation in the Middle East, and I want to thank you for all the details you brought to the conversation. A lot of things that I was not aware of, that you're always helpful that way. When we talk about something like this, we talk about the anti-Semitism. It's people listening. They can have a tendency to go like, okay, you know what? This is so depressing. So what's the hope? Well, the hope is in Yeshua. The hope is in Jesus. Because if anybody listening to the sound of my voice or watching this video with John and I, if you're listening because you're curious about the Middle East and you're listening and you go like, this is depressing, this is all negative, and then the whole world is falling apart. And I like what John Markel says all the time: the world is not falling apart; it's falling into place.
Right.
And I agree with that. But it's falling into place, meaning that if you have a relationship with Yeshua, you're okay. If you have given your life to Yeshua, to Jesus, who died for your sins, you're okay. You're going to be on the good side. You're going to be on God's side, and you'll be spared God's wrath, and you'll be in all eternity with God. But if you don't, then all the stories that you hear on in this show and the rest of my interviews, you're going like, this is all so bad. It's only bad for those who do not have a personal relationship with God. And that's my
Right.
invitation to you. That's my plea with you. If you're listening today and you're not, today is your day to just invite Yeshua in your heart and ask him to become your savior. And by doing that, just by faith, you receive this free gift and you become part of God's family, and you're safe. And it doesn't change the events of the world, but all of a sudden they're not going to affect you the way they could have until you become part of the family of God. So that's my invitation to you listeners. John, any final words? We didn't cover everything we wanted to cover, but any
Yeah,
final
I think the next time we need to have a heart-to-heart discussion on something I know we agree with about physical political Israel in the end times, because I see a lot of people trying to um, they're trying to get around it in a clever way. So the way I look at it is, so as someone who is a Christian Zionist and then has a pretty simple definition to it, it's easy for us to make Israel, political Israel, regather, at this time is kind of an idol. We can go too far with that. On the flip side of that, though, is people who try to be very clever and use theological arguments to hide their Jew hatred. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that yeah, I agree with you. That's something we need to discuss because I mean, and that be maybe maybe a little spoiler alert for the next show we do, but I don't
Yeah,
believe that you can have a political Israel without the foundation of the biblical Israel.
that's
And
right.
you would agree
And
with me on that.
right. And listen, a lot of the Bible prophecies, we were talking about this before we started, they don't make sense without a Israel back in the land as a political entity.
Right.
They just don't make any sense. They don't work. Even little prophecies like Matthew 24, pray that your flight not be on Shabbat, on Sabbath.
Right.
Well, that only works if there's an Israel there at the time that Shabbat means something, like
That
the
is
buses
right,
don't run on
exactly.
Shabbat.
Otherwise, and there's a lot more, John, that can be covered, by the term spiritual Israel that people think. But I don't want to,
Yeah,
do anything
we're
right now.
opening a
Let's do
It's a
another
long
show. You
discussion.
and I, first of the year, we'll get together again, and
Okay.
we'll do another show because I don't want to take too much of your time. And it's been almost an hour now, so I want to thank you. You're always
Thank you.
available. You always have great things to bring to the conversation, and your love for my people and your love for Israel is so evident that every time I talk to you, I'm encouraged.
Well, I appreciate that, and I feel likewise about you. So it's an interesting time to be alive. That's
To
for
say the
sure.
least. To say the
And
least.
it changes, as you said at the beginning. It changes every day.
Every morning I wake up and I go, okay, now what? And it's
Now
always
what?
and I always do my devotions first because I just want to start on the right footing.
Right.
And
It,
and and then I watch the news and I read my emails and I go like, oh no.
yeah, it was. I think I did an update recently. Please return your seats to their full upright and locked position. Because we're getting ready for something else that's going
Yes,
to happen.
for
So
landing. All right,
sometimes it's sort of like maybe the news needs to learn the concept of Shabbat
maybe.
and
So
take a day off each week.
give us one more time how we can get a hold of you before we bring to an end.
YouTube Fellowship Bible Chapel, Rumble Real FBC. There's also a Fellowship Bible Chapel app, and then also fbchapel.com, and they'll have links there for
Yeah,
different
and I'll put all
emails of
those.
staff and everything.
I'll put all those links in the description so they can go find you. John, you are a blessing. Thank you for coming on the show
Likewise.
today, and I will see you next time. And
Thanks,
shalom.
Olivier. God bless.